What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. Alright, now this is a requested video from one of my subscribers. He wanted me to do a video on who I think is the better player between Paul Pierce and Chris Bosh. And I don't have to do really much research on this particular video. To me, the better player is Paul Pierce. Okay? I don't really think this is a difficult one to ascertain. It's Paul Pierce. I know they played two different positions, but I have a strong suspicion that if Chris Bosh never went to the Miami Heat, he would probably be as memorable or as that's what I'm looking for. He would be as recognized as maybe an Amari Stoudemire or something like that. Now, no one's knocking Amari Stoudemire. He was one of the better power forwards in the NBA. But when you ask yourself who were the best power forwards of the past 20 years, he doesn't immediately jump to mind. I think he comes to mind after you name probably 6 or 7 guys ahead of him, right? However, if you ask who were the best small forwards of the past 20 years, I would say after LeBron James, and maybe due to recency bias, obviously Kawhi Leonard too, but after recency bias with Paul George, if you consider him a small forward, Paul Pierce's name will pop up then. Paul Pierce was never the most athletic player. He wasn't the quickest player, but he was very crafty. And very generally high IQ basketball player. And he was clutch. And, I think that even though the Boston Celtics really didn't do a lot of winning before the famed Big Three, who did underperform, although they didn't win a championship, Paul Pierce did at least get his team into the playoffs, I think a few times, or at least once. I think a few times before that. Whereas with Chris Bosh and the Toronto Raptors, he may have taken them to the playoffs, but it was probably one of them deals where they weren't going to really go anywhere. I'm trying to remember whether he took them to the playoffs at all, because it was so long ago. Let's look at their resumes. Chris Bosh was 6'10", listed at 235, but he definitely got smaller. I would say he may have been 235 when he was drafted, and then I think he probably bulked up to maybe 245 at one point. But then when he went to Miami, I think he probably may have dropped down to 225. Or something in that range. I think he went down to 225. That's just a guesstimate on my part. He played 14 years. The last of those years were very, very, I wouldn't say injury, but health issues. 2-time NBA champion. So he has that over Paul Pierce. 11-time NBA All-Star. All-NBA second team. NBA All-Rookie first team. Number 1 retired by the Miami Heat. Those were his career achievements as a NBA player. He scored over 17,000 career points, corralled almost 7,600 rebounds, and dished out almost 1,800 assists. Those equals out to career averages of 19.2 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. When you look at his career PR rating, it's 20.6. which is indicative of an all-star level player. 15 is average, 20 is an all-star level, 25 is a superstar. More or less. Although guys who played longer may have taken a hit in their PR ratings. He shot 49.4% from the field, 33.5% from beyond the arc. He really didn't develop a three-point shot until he went to Miami. And he was always a good foul shooter, 79.9% from the charity stripe. His best years were 2005 to maybe 2000 and, well, really until the blood clot issue. You know, he had injury issues at the end. I'm going to say that 11-year period, he averaged 20.3 points, 8.6 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1 block, 49.8% from the floor, 33.5% from three-point range, and 80.9% from the charity stripe. He was an all-star for 11 consecutive seasons. In the postseason, his numbers are probably down because most of his playoff appearances were with the Miami Heat, and that's indicative of what I see here. 15.6 points, 7.5 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 47.3% shooting from the floor, but he shot 38.6% from downtown and 80% from the foul line. Exactly 80% from the foul line. His best statistical run was, so he did go to playoffs twice with the Toronto Raptors. His best statistical run is a first round series where they lost 4 games to 1. I don't know who it was so long ago. 24 points per game, 9 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.6 steals, 47% shooting from the floor, and 83% from the foul line. I remember him being a poor rebounder. I remember Chris Bosh being a poor rebounder. On defense, he gave effort, but oftentimes there were size and strength issues with him. More or less strength issues with him. Though with Miami, he did develop that outside shot. It became a bit of a mismatch with traditional bigs. But, you know, he had to totally alter his game in Miami. Before that, he was a little bit more of he was more of a mid-range, somewhat post player, if I remember correctly, in Toronto. Went in the post some, mid-range shooting, but he expanded his range in Miami, and he became more of an outside shooter. And to maneuver on the perimeter, he had to lose some weight, and he struggled a lot the first couple of years, but then he came into his own. Obviously, was never considered the best player in Miami. As a matter of fact, he was not supposed to be the third guy. He was supposed to be Carmelo Anthony. But ultimately, he earned the respect of Miami Heat fans, even though I think Skip Bayless did him a disservice calling him what he called him. Now, let's look at Paul Pierce. 6'7", 235 pounds. He played some 19 seasons, primarily a small forward, but a few times he played the shooting guard position. Drafted in 1998, Chris Bosh in 2003. Incidentally, they both were in the same Hall of Fame class. Chris Bosh played for the Toronto Raptors and Miami Heat. Paul Pierce, the Boston Celtics, Brooklyn Nets, Washington Wizards, and Los Angeles Clippers. So Paul Pierce, NBA champion, NBA Finals MVP, 10-time NBA All-Star, All-NBA second team, 3 times All-NBA third team, NBA All-Rookie first team, NBA three-point contest champion in 2010, and considered one of the top 75 players in NBA history. Number 34, retired by the Boston Celtics. Scored over 26,000 career points, finished a bucket ahead of John Havlicek, who scored 26,395 points, although Hondo did it all with the Boston Celtics. Paul Pierce, I think, I want to say Paul Pierce is third in franchise history in scoring behind Havlicek and Bird. Paul Pierce had 7,527 rebounds and 4,708 assists. Career average is 19.7 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.5 assists. A career PR rating of 19.7. Just about at 20, which is indicative of an all-star level player. 44.5% shooting, which sounds very low, but you also got to consider the era that Paul Pierce played in. 36.8% three-point shooter, 80.6% from the free throw line. Paul Pierce's peak, in my opinion, would be 2000 to maybe 2009. For that decade, Paul Pierce averaged 23.7 points, 6.4 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 1.5 steals, 44.3% shooting from the floor, 36.5% from three-point range, and 80.1% from the charity stripe. Paul Pierce in the playoffs, averaged 18.7 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 1.2 steals, 42.3% shooting overall, 35.5% from the three-point range, and 83% from the charity stripe. And his best years, maybe 2001 to 2009, maybe. Although you could argue that he was still good after age 31. He was, but I just think that those were his best years. 22.2 points, 6.8 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 1.4 steals, 42.2% shooting, only 32.5% from three-point range, 81.9% from the free throw line. All right, so Paul Pierce was a deadly scorer. Not the most physically gifted, but clutch performer. And another thing about Paul Pierce, he definitely made sure to use his size. Wasn't the smallest guy. He definitely, not as big as LeBron, but 6'7", 235 or so. He definitely had strength on him, definitely could utilize his size, could shoot over people. On defense, he wasn't an overwhelming shutdown kind of guy, but he could surprise you on defense. I remember he kind of regularly blocked Michael Jordan's shot when he was with the Wizards. So when he gave effort, he could be effective on defense. Like I said, never be a perennial, shutdown guy, but he was, I would say, an average defender who could at times rise to the occasion when motivated. A lot of times, though, his energies went to his offensive game. I remember him being a clutch guy. I remember having big games against the other team's best players or the best players in the NBA. Paul Pierce, to me, I think, proved that he could do more with less. Even though the Boston Celtics weren't really good. But they went to the playoffs, 4 times before the Big Three, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2000. So that's 4 years in a row that Paul Pierce took a mediocre team to the playoffs, or led a mediocre team to the playoffs. And he didn't really have a great team. I mean, the best teammate he had at the time was Antoine Walker. So while he did have a Big Three that he benefited from, absolutely, he also did take a mediocre team 4 years in a row to the playoffs. And in 2002, I think they went all the way to the conference finals, I believe. So, it is what it is. But yeah, I would pick Paul Pierce over. I think he has the better resume. I think he was a more impactful player. Even though I think, Chris Bosh definitely came into his own with Miami eventually. A lot of that success came at the hands of him playing with the best small forward in the game. And at that time, probably the best shooting guard in the NBA, at least for a couple of years. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So Pierce did benefit from playing with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, but that came by the time he was 30 years old. So it is what it is. But anyway, tell me what you guys think.